So welcome to today's topic. We're discussing about implementing a drop-down component using dynamic components. I have set up the system already. So I've set up a start page and I put in the drop-down component. And in the drop-down component, I have a button that says open close. And when I click it, it shows a div that we're going to put the dynamic content in, or the dynamic components inside. In the front end, it looks as follows. There's an open and close button, and if I click it, this div opens up. And what it is also doing is like the div below has position absolute, which means it hovers over the rest of the content below. So if I go back to the page we're writing on, first off, I want to hand over the drop-down component an array of dynamic components. The reason why I'm doing this, I want to configure the drop-down component from the outside, and that just ensures that we write the drop-down components once and we can actually reuse it whenever we need it inside different pages with different content. So first of all, I therefore declare an input, and the input is public. We want to feed it from the outside. I call it dynamic components, and it's an array of a dynamic component of type any. And because we want to set up, or we want to have the system running when we're setting it up, I initialize this with an empty array. So we get this from the outside, and then inside our HTML template, we have the dynamic content that we want to fill in. And in here, we want to use the dynamic component. And the dynamic component gets just one simple dynamic component handed over. And we have an array, and this is just a single specific instance. So we want to loop over this stuff. So I go with ng template because it ain't visible in the output. And I go with ng4 let dynamic component, and the ng4 off is the dynamic components array that we have already declared. So I take this thing here down, and now we have already set up the system so we can actually fill the drop down completely. So actually from the side of how the dynamic component is written, we're already done. There's one specialty that I want to do. I'm not sure if SSO dynamic is inline or block, so I'm just giving it a div around. And we're good. Now, what we can also do is, what we have to do is hand over the dynamic components. And on the start page that I had written, first of all, I have to hand over what is needed. And I give it the dynamic components. And because it's not declared, I just copy the lower part over from the dropdown that we have already written, and I put this into the start page. And implements on init. So when I start this thing up, I want to make sure that the content is set correctly inside. Init drop down, which means I create a new function just for this specific purpose on the page. And this is also void, and it initializes the dynamic components that we have. This is an array that we hand over, and inside the array we can create a dynamic component of type any, and any is not really helpful here. So I would go with a shared text click component. The shared text click component is one of those small components that is just very helpful on the page. So it has, first I need to redeclare this thing here, shared text click components, and as an inputs, as an example, it has text, and with the text I can declare what text should be visible inside the dropdown. And because I'm not really creative, I'm just gonna put this thing here. It's not input, it's inputs. So this one's correct as well. And soon we're gonna also declare the outputs, but I'm currently not there. I just want to see whether this thing works. And so I don't really want to just have one dynamic component set inside, but I want to have several. So here I'm just gonna put in like a number 2 as well. Now, if I go back to the page, I render this and I'll go back to the dynamic components page. We still have the open and close button. If I click on it, it will open the field and we have like the shared text click component 1 and 2 inside the div. And yeah, so we're actually done. Now, having those text click components in here might be useful if there are something like links. But what's also possible is that you just want to, whenever you click something, you want to actually trigger an action. And to do so, we have to hand it over an event emitter. And the cool thing here is that we feed the event emitter, or we declare the event emitter from the outside, and so I just declare the event emitter from the Angular core, and then I hand that thing over to the shared text click component. So I don't really know what the key is for it. I just have to check it out, and it's the clicked text. That's what happens when I click on the text click thing. So I go here, I go on outputs, and I hand it over the text clicked event emitter that we have just defined before. So I can do this twice. I would also like to go down and place it on the second one, so it doesn't really matter which one we're pressing. The shared text click component will emit the text that is on this thing, except if there's like, I think there's an emit value that I can overwrite. So there's a specific value that would then be emitted. We can test that out later, maybe. And then I would have to go and init the text clicked behavior. This is just what happens when you now click on the specific text. So I'll go a bit further down here. I write this method. It also returns nothing. And now here I'm going to leave out something, because whenever you subscribe to an emitter, you have to also unsubscribe. But this is just like, an example. So I leave this away. Usually I have a subscription element on my class, and then I have like subscriptions.add, and this would then be automatically deleted if I destroy the component, but we're not doing this. So I go to text clicked and I subscribe to it, and then there is data that is handed over from the emitter, and now I can do something with the data. And the most obvious thing is just to log it, and yeah, that's already all. So now we're done. We have already written our own dropdown component. That is actually quite useful. It's not styled perfectly at the moment. There's still room for improvement, but I currently don't care about that. So I have saved that. I return to the page. It reloads the page, and if I open the console inside the browser and I expand the dropdown and I click on the first one, it actually returns undefined twice. So I have to go and also set this value, emit text if value is not present. So I set this to true, but only on the second one, and on the first one I just want to emit a value, and the emitted value can be anything. It can be a reference on this or an object I have written myself. So I just write the test object, and now if I go back to the page and I click open and close, on the first thing it actually puts out the object that I have created. On the second click, I just get the text back that I entered on the component itself. And to show you that I can actually add as much components as I would actually love to have, I can go here, and instead of the text click component, I would go with a shared icon component, and the shared icon component is basically just any icon that is in the front awesome set that I had already declared. And obviously the text or the inputs are not the same on this particular thing. It, as far as I know, does not have any outputs. So I can actually delete that because I'm not interested in it. And the shared icon component takes an icon, which would be a solid icon FA plus. And let's say I want to use something else. FA beer sounds just about right. I don't want to edit it in here. So I would return that to the FA plus, and I go back and set the icon here and put that to solid icons FA beer. Also add a comma at the end because I'm pretty sure I'm going to add additional parameters at one point. So that's just preparedness that Git does not need to change 2 lines of code whenever you do a commit. And now if I press open close, there's the beer mug appearing as a different component. And now you can see that I preserve the flexibility on whatever I do. I could now go and figure out why there's that much space in between the icons, put an underline underneath the div that we have created. Those will be the next steps. And we're actually done. We have created a drop-down component that is very widely usable and configurable for whatever use cases you have. Thank you very much for listening. And I think the next module will be about dynamic tables. Thank you and goodbye.